Look at me being a badass, talking right through the PokeMoshPit intro. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another PokeMoshPit Wi-Fi battle. Today I, TonyFlygon, am bringing you a Pokemon Black 2 White 2 Uber battle head against fellow PokeMoshPit director, MapCRimSoNCobRa117. Looking at the team preview, my team is at the top, his team is at the bottom. As you can see, I'm running a stall team, you must all love that, but his Darkrai is kind of threatening me. It's really dangerous towards my team. The main reason, or the main way, the main method of dealing with Darkrai is outspeeding it and destroying it. I cannot do that. The only Pokemon you might think outspeeds it is Mewtwo, but it doesn't. My Mewtwo has a more defensive EV spread, therefore it cannot outspeed the Darkrai. Therefore, Darkrai is a huge problem. I'm probably gonna have to get a nice sleep fodder in the form of what's likely gonna be my Arceus Poison, and then switch in Blissey without the fear of being a Dark Voided, and deal with Darkrai that way. Blissey is going to have a lot of weight on its shoulders, because Blissey is going to have to take care of this Dialga as well, who could fire up some really powerful Draco Meteors. That's going to be dangerous. The other Pokemon aren't threatening me as much. As for lead options, he's probably going to lead with either his Kyogre or his Dialga. Just in case he leads with Dialga, I decide to lead with my Mewtwo, because my Mewtwo can outspeed the Dialga and taunt the Dialga before it sets up his Stealth Rock. Now, if he did lead with Kyogre, I could easily switch to my Giratina, who is specially defensive. He did not though. He led with his Dialga. I go for Taunt. He goes for Draco Meteor instead of setting up the Stealth Rock. He could have done. But looking back, I probably shouldn't have taunted there, because him setting up Stealth Rock in this scenario is very unreasonable, seeing as there's a Mewtwo in his face, and Mewtwo is one of the biggest threats in the game. Therefore, you are probably not going to give it a free Calm Mind or anything of that nature, because for all he knew, I was a Calm Minding set or a Choice Spec set or whatever. He Draco Meteors, I recover it off the following turn as he switches to his Kyogre. Kyogre is a big threat towards my Mewtwo. I therefore decide to switch out to my specially defensive Giratina, who can handle with this Kyogre appropriately. However, he shows me Scald. Scald is very uncommon on Kyogre, and when I say very uncommon, I rarely ever see it. It's really uncommon. He of course gets the burn, that's how Scald works, and it's not really how it works, but it makes you feel like it works that way. Yeah, I'm sure it's not gonna stay in, so I go for Roar. His initial switch in is Darkrai, good to know, and I roar out his Arceus. Now, before we move on, I would like to point out that Arceus is a normal type. Also, his Arceus, although it may not seem that way, it does have Life Orb, it does have normal type. We checked, or he checked rather, in his summary, it has a normal type moveset. It just doesn't look like that. I don't know why, it's probably Pokegen messing up, but just assume it's a normal type. He told me there was no confusion, it's a normal type. But that's bad news for him in this scenario, because there's still a Giratina in his face that kind of deals with normal type Arceus really well, so I decided to make the switch to Blissey, because he had the initial switch to my Giratina being his Darkrai. I figured he'd do it again, seeing his hazards aren't up, there's no reason for him to switch it up. I go to Blissey to deal with this Darkrai. He sets up a substitute on my Toxic. That is really bad news. He's definitely gonna Dark Void now. So I decided to switch to my Arceus Poison, which I mentioned before in the team preview is likely gonna be my sleep fodder. I don't think Arceus is gonna have too much of an impact this battle, therefore Arceus is going to be my sleep fodder of choice. I can then switch back to Blissey, who can now freely go for Seismic Tosses without fearing Dark Void, without fearing him freely setting up nasty plots on my face, so that's good. Now, he is gonna switch out with a substitute up. There's plenty of people who think never waste a substitute, but Crims decided to do this because this would give him a free opportunity to switch into his Black Kyurem, and without fearing a status move from my Blissey being Toxic. Now, I understand this, it's fair, I think it's a good play, but I do have a good matchup for his Black Kyurem. I still have my Ferrothorn in the wings at full health, and this Ferrothorn is physically defensive. If you do not believe me, this is Black Kyurem base 170 attack, Freeze Shock, which is a 140 power move. It's barely a 2-hit KO, and probably not even a 2-hit KO after leftovers. He does get the paralysis, so he does get the side effects he wants so far. Fairly annoying. It's gonna play back later. Come back to play a huge role later, I should say. Here he's gonna try and charge again as I try to go for spikes, but the paralyzation kicks in already. really annoying. I do have to protect, so my strategy is let him charge, protect on the turns he tries to attack, but on the turn he attacks, my protect fails due to paralyzation, but he misses as well, so that it kind of cancels each other out. He tries to go for free shock again, as I now successfully go for spikes. I get on my first layer, and I can now go for protect on the turn he attacks. And this is how, ladies and gentlemen, you turn a black Kyurem behind a substitute into complete setup fodder. This is how we do it. Now, before we continue, here he's gonna switch out. You may think again switching out with the substitute, but he realizes it's total setup fodder. He's no reason to stay in here. I could just set up spikes all over him. Therefore, I just had to go for lead seed on the switch. I would have done the same thing. I would have switched out as well. So I totally understand that switch. I lead seed, get back to full due to Dialga's HP recovery thanks to my lead seed. And I can now make a successful switch to anything I want, really. I can switch to my Mewtwo here, or I can switch to my Blissey here. I'm not sure what to do. I could have switched to my Mewtwo as virtually resistance to his Fire Blast, Flamethrower, and Aura Sphere, which are the likely moves he would go for on my Ferrothorn due to the rain. And I could taunt him from preventing upsetting his Stealth Rock, from preventing him upsetting up his Stealth Rocks. But I decided to go to Blissey. Blissey is my Stealth Rocker, and at this point I found it more valuable for me to get up my Stealth Rocks, even though that would mean he would get up his as well. I am a stall team. I already got up one layer of spikes. Entry hazards are the way to go for me. That's how I get very helpful damage. I can get nice damage on his Darkrai as well, preventing him from setting up a substitute. Getting nice damage on his Arceus, Stealth Rock, and Spikes are gonna really rack up on that Black Kyurem as well. It just seemed like the best choice overall. But now my Blissey is in. Blissey is a dangerous and tricky Pokemon to play with because it leaves a lot of opportunities for my opponent to come in. Now, realizing this, I have to play aggressive. I need to keep the momentum in my favor. Therefore, I decided to make the switch to Mewtwo on the same turn he switches to his Ferrothorn. Therefore, I can prevent him from setting up his spikes, go for Taunt on the same turn. He probably sees this coming and he's probably gonna switch out like he does, but I don't have to risk it. That's the point. If he switches out, he's gonna get wrecked by hazards. I can just safely Taunt, and the Kyogre is in. I have a good switch in for this Kyogre. Now, last time I made a very obvious switch to my specially defensive Giratina into his Kyogre. So I'm fairly sure he's either gonna Ice Beam or either gonna pull a double switch. For that reason, I'm gonna stay in and I'm gonna go for Psystrike. If he had gone for Ice Beam, I could easily take it because I am max HP and I have a lot of special defense investment, as you could see on the first turn from that Dialga's Draco Meteor. He does make the switch to Black Kyurem. I do stay in, I do go for Psystrike, and that is a big threat out of the way. However, this leaves him and gives him a free opportunity to bring in his Darkrai, which is fairly annoying. And here I make an over prediction, probably the only play I regret making this game. I should have switched to Blissey here, but I figured he would predict my Blissey switch, go for Focus Blast, but in all honesty, he was in no position to predict here. I just predicted him, which cost him his Black Kyurem. He was likely gonna go for the safe play. My Mewtwo is such a boss though, surviving a super effective stab, Life Orb, Dark Pulse from a Darkrai. I do miss the Will-O-Wisp though. That was crucial because with Life Orb, Entry Hazards, and Will-O-Wisp hitting, the Darkrai could not have switched out and I could have stalled it out with Blissey and Darkrai would have been out of the way. Now, I figured he'd go for another Dark Pulse, but he makes a solid prediction. Very good play. Nails my Blissey on the switch with a Focus Blast. Now, I was kind of debating whether or not I should go for Soft Boiled at this point, but there was one fear I had. He could potentially Nasty Plot up on the turn I Soft Boil. I did not want that to happen. I decided to go for this way instead and go for Seismic Toss just in case he predicts my Soft Boiled and goes for Nasty Plot. This, however, opens up a new weakness to my team because now his Dialga is turning into a really big threat, and especially because Blissey and Mewtwo are on low health, it's very tricky to deal with. I was hoping he'd go for Sword Stance with the incoming Arceus, and I could therefore go for Soft Boil to deal with the Dialga better, but he realized this, goes straight for Brick Break, takes me out. As I then get a free switch into my Gliscor, I go for Taunt on his switch to Ferrothorn, as I easily scare out this Arceus. And even if I don't scare it out, I then prevent him from setting up too many Sword Stances, and I can then poison him, or I can then Earthquake him and deal with him appropriately. Ferrothorn comes in though, thinking he could have an opportunity from setting up spikes. However, he can't because I taunted him on the switch. And this leaves him in a predicament, because when you look at his team on the right hand side, if I Earthquake now, I can just severely break down his Ferrothorn with Taunt and Earthquake. If he switches to his Dialga, I can 2-hit KO that with Earthquake and outspeed him the second turn. If he brings in his Kyogre, I can 2-hit KO that with Earthquake because of entry hazards, and I'm likely gonna outspeed. Since he revealed Scald, he's most likely a more defensive version and not that fast. If he brings in his Arceus, that's also shut down by Gliscor. So Gliscor here is pretty much putting him in a very bad position. He decides to stay in at first with his Ferrothorn as I'm able to Earthquake it, and he has to go for Power Whip to do damage on me. Because I had taunted him, he cannot lead seat me, he cannot spike on me. Taunt Gliscor is great in Ubers as well, just keep that in mind. This right here, this situation, this scenario, it shows you. He now decides to switch into his Kyogre because his Ferrothorn is just pretty much gonna die and he's not gonna do any damage to me. And he switches to Kyogre, and as you can see, I can easily 2-hit KO it after entry hazards. But here, I decide to make what's arguably a bad play, although I would do it again, even had I known this knowledge, because I decide to switch out next turn. I'm gonna try and explain to you here. Even though I could outspeed and 2-hit KO, I decided to switch out. This Kyogre set is unknown to me. I don't know what he would run, what EVs he has, what other moves he has, what he has up his sleeve. I'm not sure what the Kyogre is gonna do. It's an unpredictable situation, and the safer move for me would be to switch out to either Ferrothorn or Giratina. Those can handle bulky Kyogre really well. They can take its moves and take him out with the appropriate move. And even if I couldn't do that, I could wall him and prevent him from switching out because of the entry hazards. If I stay in with Gliscor and he for some reason ends up outspeeding me, even though I have some speed investment and a higher base speed stat, that would be horrible because Gliscor is gonna play a huge role in the end of the game, because Gliscor can take on every of his Pokemon but this Kyogre if it outspeeds me. Therefore, I decided to switch out, do the safe play, and it's gonna turn out later that I do outspeed the would have outsped the Kyogre, but I'm glad I didn't risk it, because if he had outsped me, it would have been a horrible situation for me, and it's probably the safer play to go for. But anyway, I decided to switch to my Ferrothorn, who can take his Scald, and he now switches up to Hydro Pump, revealing it's not Choice Scarf. Not that I expected that, but it could have been. Again, unknown to me. I was thinking Lumberry, and with Scald being an offensive anti-lead for opposing Darkrai's, but again, I couldn't be sure. I take him out with Power Whip, Kyogre out of the way as his Dialga comes back in. Now, like I said before, Dialga turned into a big threat once my Blissey died, because I really don't have a good switch in for this. What I decide to do is bring in my sleeping Arceus Poison. I can hopefully take 2 hits and try and wake up and get some damage in on this, either get some damage in or recover up or do anything of those lines. But even if I can't, it's good death fodder at this point, because I don't need it anymore. I don't need to sleep fodder anymore because I took care of his Darkrai, and this brings me to a point where I can freely switch into my Mewtwo and get a Will-O-Wisp off on this Dialga, because I need to get some residual damage on this Dialga to get him below half, because my Earthquake with Gliscor is not gonna be able to take him out at this point. So I cannot bring in my Gliscor just yet, because Dialga is simply too bulky. Even though it's stab and super effective, I have to get more damage on this Dialga before I can bring in my Gliscor. Therefore, I decided to bring in my Mewtwo, go for Will-O-Wisp, because residual damage in combination with entry hazards is definitely gonna be the way to go and try and take out this this Dialga. He, however, realizes this. He realizes how big of a threat his Dialga has been since the Blissey died. So, therefore, he decides to switch out and fodder off his, pretty much fodder off his Ferrothorn. I could taunt here. I wasn't sure whether or not a Power Whip would take me out from that range. I didn't want to risk it. The damage calc showed it could or could not, and again, I'm not taking the chance. I kind of played cowardly, you could say. I prefer to call it safe. I don't risk when I don't have to. Risk versus reward, I don't like it. I'm not a risky player when I don't have to. I'm sure I can predict whenever necessary, but when I don't have to, I won't. I'm gonna switch in my Ferrothorn, try and get up some spikes if possible, and he realizes I'm trying to make him set up fodder, and he tries to kill himself by going for Power Whip, activating my Iron Barb so he can get a free switch in. He now realizes I'm only gonna go for spikes, and he makes a really good play, and this is really a good play, because he switches in Dialga before I get up another layer of spikes. I would have gotten the layer of spikes, but as you can see, I got paralyzed again. I would have been at 3 layers already, and I could have lead seeded this turn, but I got paralyzed twice, so I'm only at 2nd layer now, and that's too bad. Ferrothorn is no longer necessary in my opinion. I prefer to have a free switch into my Mewtwo before he could potentially Draco or Dragon Pulse on the switch. Or even kill me after entry hazards with R-Sphere, which is very likely. So, yeah, that would have taken me out easily, now that I look at it. Yeah, so I'm glad I foddered it up. I can now bring in Mewtwo, I can now go for Will-O-Wisp, take out this Dialga, or at least hinder the Dialga. He didn't want to switch out again because of the extra layer of spikes and Stealth Rock, so he was trapped pretty much. I need a little bit more damage though, and I know my Gliscor can bring it home as soon as I bring that Dialga below half, because I have a damage calc. I did the damage calc and it's 44 to 52% damage with the Earthquake, so I'd rather be safe. And here I bring in my Giratina. I outspeed the Dialga. He was surprised. But Dialga and Giratina have the same base speed stat. They're both base 90 speed. And I love speed creeping when I make my teams. I have weird speed invested, because when you have EVs left, like the 4 EVs when you go max attack, or I don't know what you're doing, max HP, max defense, and there's 4 EVs left, put them into speed always. That's the only stat that matters when it comes to 4 EVs. And yeah, my EV spread turns out to work, because I outspeed him and I'm able to stall him out, and I can even roar him out with the Sleep Talk. It didn't matter as much as you'd think it would. I already brought him down enough. If he had killed me on that turn, the burn would have brought him down to a range where Earthquake would have killed him. But this ensures victory even more, because after entry hazard damage he has to undergo when coming back in. He's definitely into killing range of my Gliscor's Earthquake. I can now go for Sleep Talk again. I'm not gonna get the Roar, I'm gonna get the rest, but it doesn't really matter, seeing as he can now take me out. I can then safely bring in my Gliscor, Earthquake him, and it's gonna be a 1v1 between my Gliscor and his Arceus. And his Arceus turns out to be a Life Orb Swords Dancing variant, as I mentioned before. And it is normal type, so when it does go for extreme speed, don't think it doesn't get stab on it, because it does. I know it sounds and it looks weird, but it is a normal type. Even when you check in summary, it says normal type. We don't know what the color is changed for some reason. But what I pretty much have to do is debate what kind of Arceus set he is. Seeing as he didn't have leftovers, and I didn't know what else he could have. He could be Lumberry, he could be bulky with Recover. I wasn't sure at this point. I could have gone for Toxic, seeing as if I had gone for Earthquake and he then recovered, because I know my Earthquake is not gonna take out the Arceus at this point. I would have been in a tough situation. I had to taunt then, and I had to poison, and it would have been tricky. But now I realize it's probably just a standard Extreme Killer. Sword Stance, 3 attacks, I can just 2 KO with Earthquake. He tries to go for a +2 extreme speed crit, does not get it. It's a close 1-0 victory. I hope you all enjoyed. Guys, by the way, don't forget, if you have any questions regarding Black 2, White 2, how to run it on Desmiomi, how to make it work on your Ace card, please leave a PM to youtube.com/TheWildChase. Link will be on your screen. I hope you all enjoyed. Please rate the video for PokeMoshPit if you want. Check out my channel if you would like to see more. That'll be all out of me. 19 minutes. God damn, this video is way too long. I hope you all enjoyed still. Goodbye.